Okay, I am recording. My phone is silent. My fan is off. My mind is open. My heart is full.
Yay.
I love you so much.
I love you too. We're going to make it.
We're going to make it, baby girl.
We're going to make it. Yeah. Okay. Greetings and welcome to Ill Repute, the podcast about women and women first. I'm Sovereign Sire, a writer, a comedian, and freshly rebranded.
I love that for you.
Yes, you can go visit my website, sovereignsire.net. We made it real pretty. We did some rebranding around the house, improved some things that really needed to be improved. And my laptop died, and I had to get a new one. And my laptop was 8 years old.
Wow.
8. And I looked up how long they're supposed to last, and it is 3 to 5.
Well, hi, I'm Ella Darling, a VR pioneer, a former librarian, and a hydrated and moisturized bitch.
Oh, we love that. We love that.
Yeah, I'm doing my best. I'm doing my gosh darndest over here. Tell you what. Now, we here at Ill Repute support women's rights.
But more importantly, we support women's wrongs.
And what women's wrongs are we writing today, Sabi?
Another man.
Another man.
I caught us another one.
Oof.
So if you listened last week, we profiled Dr. Harold Gillies, who pioneered modern plastic surgery after learning on the fly how to deal with traumatic soft tissue damage wounds to the face. And then at the end, we talked about how he also performed the first phalloplasty on a patient named Michael Dillon, who was a trans man, a transsexual man. And so today we're going to talk about Michael Dillon because I want to kind of differentiate. A phalloplasty had been performed before because people have hurt their genitals before.
Okay.
But it is believed that Michael was the first assigned female at birth person to have a constructed penis for psychological, emotional reasons, not because there was like something wrong.
Right.
Because it can get a little kind of,
Yeah, if you want to split hairs, you can split hairs.
Yeah.
But get on board with us,
Yeah.
Play in the space with us.
Yeah. So for the sake of clarity, I am referring to Michael as he and him throughout the text.
Mm-hmm.
Although I will occasionally use their birth name to differentiate between pre and post transition. So when they change their name to Michael, they will be Michael. Before that name change, they will be Lauren.
But we're using male pronouns because while they may have had a different name for part of their life, they have been male the entire life.
Michael was born on May 1st, 1915 in Kensington, England. His mother had previously given birth to a son who was born prematurely. A little over a year later, Michael was born, and shortly thereafter, his mother died. For reasons Michael was never sure of, his father never introduced his mother to his family, and the only witnesses at the wedding were Michael's aunt and cousin, who happened to be in London at the time. His mother had first fled Australia and landed in South Africa, where she married. That husband was thrown from a horse and killed early on in the marriage.
Sure.
So she fled to England and met Michael's father, who was already in his late 40s. For this reason, Michael only ever had his father's side of the family in his life.
Wow. So his father never introduced his mother to his family. Okay, I got that backwards in my mind. That's interesting. And so he just never got to meet anyone on her side.
Michael's dad is going to prove to be a lot.
Oh, Jesus. That is such an ever-present thing in these stories.
Yeah.
His father had already ruined a career in the Royal Navy due to alcoholism. He apparently sobered up for Michael's mother, and when she died shortly after his birth, his father blamed Michael. His father had the 2 children sent to Folkestone, where they were raised by an aunt. The kids were 2 generations younger than their caregivers, who he described as Victorian in their character. That is, traditional and conservative and very old. Due to the deaths of husbands before and just after Michael and his brother were born, they were raised by a crew of 6 aunts and no uncles, which is to say he was awash in an estrogen ocean. That's a lot. That's a lot of old women to be doting on a young person.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of like very kind of gray garden stuff going on here, which is I found to be very interesting.
Yeah.
So the favored aunt was named Toady, who they also called Toto. Toto feigned Victorian weakness and was afraid to venture out and tried very hard to instill that into Michael. And as a result, he didn't see much outside of Folkestone until he was nearly an adult. It was in this world that Michael was christened. He was named after his mother, Laura Maud Dillon, which remained his name until he had it legally changed to Lawrence Michael in 1943.
What do we know about Folkestone? Like, what was it like? What is that place?
They were a barony, a baronetcy, a baronet. It was just, old and English and kind of, it wasn't in the city. It wasn't like metropolitan. It was, a hamlet.
Michael and his brother were in the service of a string of nannies, and it was a nanny that witnessed his first steps, to which she said, "Yes, yes, dear," and then went about her business, not concerned with the milestone that had been reached. He recalls early in his childhood having a nanny that was involved with a soldier that was missing both legs. Around this time was when Michael recalls the first instance of dysphoria. Quote, "One morning we were being dressed to go to the barber when I unadvisedly said, 'I want my hair cut like Bobby's.' Nanny only laughed and said, 'Don't be silly, you can't. You're a little girl and he's a little boy.'" So I'm curious, how did he learn that? How did he learn the response to his first steps? Because that seems too early to have that memory.
He remembered it.
He just remembered it? Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Damn.
That was probably sort of his first memory.
Oh, that would be that makes sense why that would stand out, because it's something that you're doing. Yeah. And when you're a little kid, you expect people to be as amazed about everything as you are. You think that your feelings are universal, and to have someone that, I don't know, I want to give this little kiddo a hug.
Later, the nanny embarrassed him by having him repeat the request in front of the barber. When he did, they all laughed at him together. While he and his brother bathed together as children, he didn't register a difference between him and his brother, Bobby. They were 5 and 4, respectively. They would often be dressed in sailor outfits, one with shorts and one with a kilt. However, his brother got a pea coat, and after a while, Michael badgered his aunt into getting him one too, which he wanted because it was manly. When he was 5 at Christmas, his brother was given a gift for a boy and Michael was given a gift for a girl. And he was so disappointed, he created a scene. They started visiting their father in London, where he had purchased a hotel, but he was usually hungover, and they would hang out with the surgeons and physicians from the Navy that would stay there. When Michael was 5, his brother turned 6 and went off to school. He was upset because it meant the end of their lives together.
The only constant, the only person that they've had as a confidant just got, like, not even parents to turn to. Even these aunties don't seem very auntie-ish.
Eventually, at the age of 8, he went to school, a school for ladies. Around this time, Native Americans became popular in the culture. He got a bow and arrow as a present and made his own native costume and liked to spend his afternoons pretending to hunt settlers. So I thought that was his first identity was not as a settler, but as a native.
I love that.
Soon, his grandmother died. His brother was sent to a boarding school and only came home on weekends. And Michael and his aunts moved up the street to a boarding house. he made a friend, Tony Benteen, and an enemy. He had a bully, and one day when the boy knocked him off of his bike, he beat him up, which got around to the boy's school and upped his value.
So he gets to this boarding school and gets a friend and immediately a bully. And when the bully pushes it too hard, when the bully's around, the bully finds out because Michael just knocked him straight off his bike.
Michael's like at a boarding school for girls.
Oh, this is the brother. This makes sense.
And Bobby is at a boarding school for boys. So this is like they're starting to kind of have divergent social lives.
Okay.
Right. So when Bobby's like home on the weekends, right, he's hanging out with his cool guy friends.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And the only person that Michael makes friends with is a boy that's a local neighborhood boy.
Okay.
And so one day, this bullies Michael, and Michael punches him. And suddenly, Michael was now cool to like the boys at the boys' school. And to, you know, it was kind of like this kind of thing where it made him cool again.
It's like jail, or it's like what they say to do in prison, I suppose.
Yeah.
Not jail. In time, his father died. His brother was devastated because he spent more time with their father. He only saw him 1 week a year because his Aunt Toto didn't want to be alone and would guilt trip him if he ever talked of visiting his father. After a few more deaths, they found themselves baronet but poor. Now, tell me what baronet means.
So he is in line to be a baron.
Oh, wow.
They have a baronet, like a baroncy.
Mm-hmm.
They're nobility. They're in the peerage.
Mm-hmm.
The peerage. But like a lot of people in the peerage, they are distressed nobility. So they have a title, but not so much the money part.
Almost worse to have a title and no money.
They're still, don't get me wrong, they're still, in terms of class, I mean, poor for them.
Yeah. I
you know what I mean?
I feel you. I feel like that's very much like Lord Byron to some degree. You know, just fancy but broke, like a gilded Shein dress. His brother got writing lessons and stayed in school. He did not do so much. He took up with his aunts above a shop in the city. He hated living with his two aunts.
It's pretty brutal. Toto is just constantly like, don't leave me alone. You can't go out. Basically what we would call now like agoraphobia.
Right.
Just like really bad. And it created a lot of codependency that Michael like really resented.
Yeah, that's a lot of emotional abuse for a child. I almost want to call it parentification, but it's not quite. It's somebody listening to this will know the exact phrase and know, like, they probably have a degree in this and can tell us everything. So feel free to let us know more if you have insight.
So when Michael turned 15, he acquired a pretend father and moved into a house with him. So every year when the headmistress had a birthday, the school would take buses out to a nearby town and play cricket and eat ice cream because, you know, they're very poor. This year, the bus coming home ran into mechanical trouble. Michael was worried about Toto being worried about him being home late. And he realized that he couldn't go on living that way, just beholden to Toto's insecurities.
Good for him.
Yeah.
A new vicar arrived at the school, C.S.T. Watkins, who was married with 2 daughters, one of which was in the same class as Michael. Michael had started puberty at this point, and his breasts were coming in because he was assigned female at birth, should you have forgotten. He started binding them until another student found out and told him that he could get cancer, so he stopped. He fell in love with the vicar, imagining him to be his father. He actually stepped up to the plate.
There's a lot of that throughout this story. Michael was incredibly lucky in that he was all along the way surrounded by people that really showed up for him and supported him.
I relate to this a lot. I had a really, really good father. May he rest in peace. Yesterday was the anniversary of his death. Yeah. But I relate to this because I feel like every community I've been in, I have found somebody who kind of adopts me as their de facto daughter. And it's just very special to me when somebody like just has strong feelings of caring and just wanting to make sure you're good, even when they have no responsibility towards you. That just, it warms my bitter old jaded whore heart.
So we're going to get more into like Toto's kind of. So basically, Michael, you know, there's a new vicar that comes to the school, and Michael is able to kind of entrench himself like in this family and even stay there. Right. So this is how that happened. So Michael's dealings with Toto were bad. Toto would always tell Michael that people didn't like him and that he was a nuisance. And so Michael would cut off friendships thinking that he wasn't actually liked, but it was really just Toto's possessiveness. He hated his aunts, and he hated when he had to stay with them on break. So he would go for long walks, and eventually he got 2 pet mice, and the vicar let him hide the mice at his house. He also had a shed where he practiced carpentry with a great deal of skill. Wow. He was also great at field hockey, though multiple parents had to convince his aunts to let him play. He described it all as very emotionally abusive. And yeah.
Yeah, sounds like, I should say.
Yeah. So this is more of Toto. So Michael eventually rescued a turtle, and it was fine until it was time for the turtle to hibernate. So every time the turtle would dig a hole and try to hibernate, a lot of people don't know this, turtles will dig holes and then bury themselves to sleep. Toto would dig up the turtle and put it on the grass. And after the second time that this happened, the turtle died.
Oh my God.
And it's that thing when it's like a parental figure, like somehow factors into the loss of a pet. It's just like, yeah.
Yeah.
Michael became a voracious reader, worked on his carpentry, and spent a lot of time in the gym trying to build up his muscles. Sex and gender had not yet entered into the picture. Because of his worship of this vicar, he also started reading a lot of books on theology. This triggered his wondering. He looked at all the lives of his aunts and his own and started wondering about purpose, and specifically his purpose.
Wow.
So angsty teen, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I was getting super into philosophy that I understood more than most people at the time, or so I thought when I was that age. You know, like nobody else really got it the way that I did. Do you think that Toto intentionally killed the turtle?
Yes.
Yeah, that's pretty fucked.
I think Toto was really upset that I think Toto just felt very possessive of any outside interest or affection.
Yeah. Yeah. His discovery of sex happened at 16. The vicar was asking the girls if anything in the Bible puzzled them. He asked why lying down with animals was wrong, because he often laid down with his cat. The vicar sent him to the headmistress, who explained to him the birds and the bees. But he still didn't see what that had to do with laying down with your pet cat. Reasonable.
Yeah.
There's no place for reason here, my darling.
Yeah.
The vicar bought him a book about the birds and the bees, and he gave up about halfway through out of lack of interest. At this time, he taught himself Greek. Not that kind, though, apparently, with the help of a teacher that knew it and with gifted books from the vicar. I experienced that same confusion as a kid. Oh, my gosh.
My mom is a neonatal intensive care unit nurse. So, I mean, I knew everything immediately, like on arrival.
I just mean, like, why is it that laying down with an animal is, or like laying with, what do you mean laying with? Because I didn't connect laying with to like getting laid with, you know?
So here's more of Toto's. So Michael took the senior Cambridge certificate the next year in 1932. When he graduated, his Aunt Toto wanted him to live at home so that, you know, he could take her shopping.
Very important. Very important. Yeah. What will she do without him?
Yeah. Michael had different ideas. He wanted to leave. He wanted to get into Oxford. He asked Toto to let him go on to do a higher certificate. This is a little confusing to me because I don't come from the British school system, but I'm guessing it's a big deal.
I'm guessing it's like a degree and he wants to go for a higher degree or whatever, something like that.
Toto said that she couldn't afford it. And later, Michael found out that this was not true. But undeterred, the school offered to pay for his education if he would be a tutor, and he agreed. So despite Toto's lies, his pursuit of a higher certificate was funded. I think maybe Cambridge or Oxford, it's like they have like different, like I think certificates you can get that make you eligible to go, I think. And so what he's saying is like, he took the Cambridge certificate, but like wanted to take the one that would like get him into Oxford.
Got it.
Is kind of what I'm guessing here.
Got it. Well, good for him. The whole system is so confusing to me. Like only when I went through grad school did I really understand how the whole postgraduate school system worked. This is needlessly complicated. This was when the first pangs of his sexuality were made clear. There was a maths mistress that he fancied. The mathematics mistress was close with the history mistress who was boyish and athletic. The school put on a play where the math mistress played the hero and the history mistress played the heroine. The next day, the history mistress came up to Michael and asked if he had fallen in love with her in her male attire. He said, "No, I fell in love with the maths mistress." This would become fodder. When the math mistress later got engaged, his classmates made fun of Michael, but he hadn't drawn the line between his feelings and being queer. I remember the first girl I was head over heels for. I was so in love with her. I think I liked Ariel from The Little Mermaid because this girl that I had my first crush on had red hair. And I didn't know anything except that I was definitely in love with her. And I had an inkling that I shouldn't tell anyone. Definitely not her.
I just knew I really liked being around girls, and I experienced queerness as just not being attracted to men. You know, when other girls started going through puberty and having like their favorite boy band and all this kind of stuff, it just was like, it made no sense to me. I didn't understand why they were like obsessed with these dudes, or like it just, because like I didn't fantasize about men that way. I didn't feel attraction for men at all. Like it was just nothing, you know.
The male celebrities were always kind of boring. Like compare that to the Spice Girls. Oh my gosh, are you kidding me? You can keep them.
So that year, the Latin mistress fell ill, and the girls were shipped out to a military man named Mr. White to teach them Latin. He was coarse and rough, but it started a lifelong friendship for Michael. It was him and the vicar and the headmistress that decided that a senior certificate wasn't enough. Michael needed an Oxford entrance. It was decided that because of the limited space for women, that he should sit for the theology entrance exam.
It was around this time he realized that he was trans, or he at least started to. He was walking with the nephew of the vicar, who was a year older than him. They came to a gate, and he opened it for him, the nephew, to let Michael pass, because Michael was considered by this nephew a lady. Michael had never encountered this before, and it filled him with despair. It set him on a course of thinking. He had never thought of himself as a woman, but he realized everyone else did. He passed his exams and became an Oxford undergraduate. Way to go, Holla the Scala. Love this for you, Michael.
So, and this is where we start to see kind of the support system around Michael. Mm-hmm. So during his time at Oxford, his internal struggles started to manifest, and he was sent to Canon Tom Pym, who specialized in helping adolescents going through struggles. Two different mentors in his program, in Michael's program, on hearing of his issues, persuaded him against pursuing divinity. They saw what he didn't, that he would be bashing his head against a brick wall. He switched to honor moderations, which is basically humanities, and they decided to help him with his gaps. So like early on, I think they thought, oh, he's a lesbian.
Mm-hmm.
So him pursuing divinity is going to be just a total head because religious views around homosexuality are pretty conservative, right? So they were kind of like, yeah, you're probably going to have a hard time here. But like no one's kind of coming out and calling it what it is, right? Because he doesn't really quite know what it is yet.
I love that their response to observing this in this student was, you should really change your course of study, not you should really change your identity and who you are as a person. That is super progressive for the time. And that kind of kicks ass.
Yeah.
At Oxford, there were 3 routes: social, athletic, or studious. You could pick only 2. And all demanded athletic. Since the social world was cut off for him, he chose athletic and studious. He started rowing, he graduated and moved up in his studies, and it was at this time that he confided to a few people his discomfort at going to parties dressed up as a woman. They all told him that he was gay, and he accepted this as the answer. I mean, it's literally an answer in a sea of none, so I get that. Yeah. But still didn't pursue relationships with women because he felt this wasn't what the crux of his problem was. By now, he had short hair and was growing tall. He was the president of the rowing team. And during this time, he was photographed getting into one of the boats, and the newspaper ran the photo with the caption, "Man or Woman?" 10 years later, he would be rowing for the men's team at Trinity College in Dublin. Wow.
So this is really funny because he was an amazing rower, became sort of like captain, was like moving up, and the men and the women would practice in like different areas. And he started taking the women to practice in the men's area. And yeah, during one of these things, like he wasn't dressed as a man, but the women's uniforms were very unisex. And he had the short hair, was always working out. So it was like super muscular, was tall, right? And they're watching this person, this very masculine person, stepping onto like the women's boat and take a picture of it because it's just so hilarious. And that picture got sent back to his aunts who were like so horrified. Oh, he thought it was like, he kind of describes what I would say, what we call now maybe like gender euphoria. Like it was kind of like, it was like there was a part of him that was like, I kind of like that. I'm digging it, right?
Hell yeah.
Yeah. Aww. So he decided to major in Greek drama and logic. And for logic was sent to the tutor, Jimmy McKee, who would become another lifelong friend. He fell in love with a fellow rower named the Babe, who looked like Shirley Temple all grown up. He confessed his love to the Babe and was gently let down soon after. I mean, that was probably devastating to find out that a fellow rower was not, in fact, a homosexual.
I mean, the signs were all there. It's like, a real pulling a fast one in the last scene, last act.
Exactly. So soon after, the Babe got engaged and told Michael that if he had been a proper man, she would have married him.
Wow.
Oof.
Damn.
Oof. When he went home at the end of the term, his family was upset at his short hair and attire because he was starting to dress more masculine. He went to his Aunt Evie and tried to confide in her about being homosexual. But Aunt Evie laughed at him. It was at this point that Michael realized that he didn't have any allies, like in the family. Like Aunt Evie had been like the cool aunt, and she just like dismissed it.
Just completely out of hand.
Well, because still upper class, society people, it's like, what? No. Anyway, moving on. You know what I mean? Like kind of very like, we don't do that here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
And here's the thing. There's like a famous quote around Queen Elizabeth, who was Victorian. So this is and, they were making laws about sodomy and homosexuality. And someone proposed a law about lesbians. and Queen Victoria, I'm sorry, Queen Victoria. And she laughed. She was like, women don't do that. Like, it was just like, that's not real. No, we're not making laws around women. No.
Oh my God.
Secret ally or just truly incredulous? We'll never know.
But there's definitely a porno behind it.
Well, she was the one that was married to Prince Albert, who is like really, really good looking, and who supposedly the Prince Albert penis piercing is named after.
Was she the one?
Apparently he had a huge, and to hide it in his tight pants, they said that he had gotten like a ring through the head of his penis that he could like attach to. Yeah.
That's amazing. Was she the one?
I mean, it's probably apocryphal, but I love it.
Michael made a friend named Bill, who was a scholarship kid, and eventually confessed to Bill about his troubles. They went to boxing matches together, which women weren't allowed at, and Bill went with him to buy a sport coat so he could pretend to be a man and get in. They arrived and watched the matches together, and no one seemed to notice that he was, how they would define, a woman. He took to smoking a pipe wholly so that men wouldn't be interested in him. If only it was that easy.
Right. I have some bad news. You're not going to like this one. It's going to be a tough pill to swallow. My 7-year-old mother is still getting pics. Yeah.
It's one of my favorite bits of yours.
Yeah. So Michael made a good female friend as well that had the same issues that he did. Same, meaning Michael's still thinking I'm gay. That's what this is, right?
Right.
At this time, during his studies, he came across the philosophical tenet, quote, "The cause of the thing is the thing itself," unquote, which he took on as a mantra. Soon enough, he was of age and no longer beholden to his family. He bought a motorcycle and learned how to ride it the day that he bought it.
King.
Yeah. I think like, the reason that we're really kind of focusing on the childhood is this is all from his memoir that he wrote. And it's not necessarily claiming I always did masculine things, but in just telling his story, it becomes very clear, getting in fights, just wanting to be perceived as masculine, boxing, doing carpentry. He never calls out these things as like, oh, I was doing manly things. He never calls them manly things. These are just the things he was interested in, but they are the things that we traditionally associate with masculinity. And if you're interested in kind of talking about the dichotomy or the Venn diagram of gender and sex, Philosophy Tube actually just did a great video essay about kind of the primary misunderstanding of Judith Butler's theory that gender and sex are separate things. That's actually not what Judith Butler says. Like, Judith Butler actually says that gender is experienced as a function of our sex. They're not separate. Like, people want to think of them as completely separate things. But Judith Butler was like, no, like gender and how you experience it is a result of your physical sex and how that interacts with the world outside you. Like they're actually inextricably linked. It just maybe not the way we think they are. And like in that way, right?
And it also makes sense that he's doing things that are culturally perceived as masculine because he perceives himself to be his gender, which is male. So he's doing things that, you know, I think this is especially prevalent with little kids. They do the things that they think match what they're supposed to be doing. You do what you think you're supposed to do. But as somebody who identified as male, he was just inclined to do the things that are culturally kind of masked as mask.
Well, and the thing is, it's like he didn't perceive himself as a tomboy. Like, it was very clear that he perceived that the problem was not that.
Right.
Right. And I think that's what people gloss over. Like, they're getting rid of tom girls. They're getting rid of lesbians, and they're getting rid of gays, and they're making them have sex changes. Like, that's the rhetoric.
Yeah.
Right. And we just need time to think and time to wait. And it's like, people that are trans and that I've talked to in my personal life, and then just that I've read their writing, the thing that's common is that they seem to have a feeling that something much more global is going on emotionally, because it's not about who they're attracted to. It's about, because like sexuality is kind of like an external thing, right? It's like what I'm like attracted to, right? Gender is like how you feel about who you are. It has nothing to do with how you feel about other people, right? It's everything about how you feel and perceive yourself.
After leaving Oxford, he lived out his days as a, quote, museum piece. Everywhere he went, people would comment on whether he was a man or a woman, children, as they usually are, being the worst. He developed a poker face to all of it, but internally, it was wearing him down. Kids are the meanest. And it's mean because they're not trying to be mean sometimes. They're just sincere, and that's worse.
The worst, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, God.
Yeah. So another quote from Out of the Ordinary, which is his memoir. Quote, "It may be asked why I needed to dress in a mannish way or have an Eton crop, thus calling attention to myself. It is impossible to explain to anyone who has not had the same experience any more than he who has just emerged from the dentist's chair can convey to his friend what he has endured from the drill, when his friend has never been further than the dentist's waiting room. I could not do other than I did, while still abjuring any advice to, quote, take a woman, quote, and relieve myself of some of my repressions," unquote.
So I'm curious, so far, it doesn't seem like he's attracted to women at all, but it also doesn't seem like he's experiencing any sort of sexual desires that I've really picked up on.
He is a lifelong ascetic.
Okay,
so not ever.
He was ace too.
No, not per se.
Okay. Can you give me, like, break it down?
He felt that because he could not provide a woman with children, right, that to entertain a woman was to waste her time, because he could not give her the one thing that was going to be life-defining for her at this time, right?
All right. But
so he felt like it would be unfair. But his predilections, yes, were to women. There was like the maths mistress, right?
Right.
There was the babe in rowing school. So there were attractions. It's just that he felt like it would be unfair to, pull a woman into a life with him when he would not be able to provide her with like the one thing that was going to give her life value, which is children, because we are in the 30s. So
that's around,
if this was today, like, I'm sure he would have like very different feelings about all that.
After leaving Oxford, he got work at a lab in Gloucester that was studying the brain. He felt that the philosophical world didn't pay enough attention to biology of the mind. People didn't know what to make of him. He was miserable. The way of life was much rougher than his upbringing, and he felt utterly alone. And that's a pretty high bar to pass regarding misery, I will say.
Yeah.
He joined the WAAF, which is...
it's like the Women's Army Ambulance
Federation.
It's like sort of like volunteer kind of military, but it was ambulance, like paramedic stuff.
Okay, so he became kind of like essentially an EMT, soldier, EMT, and learned to drill and comport himself like a soldier. And when the war was declared, he was called up. He was sent to be a dispatcher because he could ride a motorcycle. But when he got there, the commandant felt that he wouldn't be proper in a woman's dormitory and sent him home, which could be acknowledging that he's kind of trans and like from his perception, and could be that y'all gays aren't welcome around our flock of gentle women. So either way, probably just a different flavor of piece of, depending on how you look at it.
Yeah.
Since the men in the lab had been drafted, he took their place, which extended the scope of his work to post-mortem assistant and radiographer, as well as microscopic work in the lab itself.
So something is being born. Michael heard of a doctor in town that specialized in sex problems, so he went to him. The doctor wanted to help, suggesting a psychiatrist friend be brought in. So Michael answers a bunch of questions from the psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist seems game to help Michael, and he went home full of hope. However, the next time that he saw the doctor was afraid of being drafted and leaving Michael in like a half-finished state. So he like backed out. But he did give Michael a packet of male hormones and told him to see what they could do. The psychiatrist was friends with a doctor at Michael's work at the lab and told this doctor all about Michael's problem. That doctor, in turn, told all of Michael's colleagues, and Michael found out from the secretaries that everyone knew that he wanted to be a man, and they all thought it was funny.
Where are we at with the ethics and oaths?
Oh, that was already unethical.
Shit?
That was already unethical.
But I mean,
that was already unethical. Yeah.
I don't know when.
Yeah.
HIPAA wouldn't have applied here because it's not America. But like, at what point, like this is a crime today. This would be criminal. Not just outing somebody as trans, which is socially criminal, though perhaps not legally enforceably. But as a doctor, as a psychiatrist, is anybody providing that and just telling someone that ethics, absolutely unethical. But like, this is why we have laws that prohibit people from sharing your personal medical data because of
but that was already a social rule in place, even though HIPAA wasn't there yet. Because Michael talks about it in the book.
The thing about social rules is that if you deem someone to be antisocial, you decide that the rules don't apply in their case and they're subhuman. And that's why, like, it sucks that we have to legislate this. I don't think we should have to legislate anything. But the fact that it was a social rule clearly didn't uphold anything. What a piece of... This is what leads to life. What do we call it?
Yeah.
What's the euphemism? Unaliving.
Yeah, unaliving. So shortly afterwards, Michael left the lab and joined the FANY, the Fannies, basically people who had been deputized to drive the American ambulances that had been sent over to help with the war effort. So now he is living in Bristol. So shortly after this, he was in a motorcycle accident that left him unable to walk for a month. So he had to leave the Fannies and ended up getting work as a gas station attendant, an Oxford graduated gas station attendant, where he would stay for 4 years. So soon after the first blitz happened in Bristol, it caused a huge fire, which meant there needed to be a night watchman at the garage to look out for like incendiaries. And Michael volunteered to take that job, which meant staying overnight, like in this huge kind of, it wasn't like a typical gas station. It was like where military trucks would go and like load up on gasoline and stuff like that. And like you would also repair the vehicles. So more of like an auto body shop, but like a really big one.
And an important one for military tactics. So they needed somebody to guard the perimeter and to make sure that while these soldiers and their vehicles were in disrepair, somebody was watching their six.
Also, and then at night, because they were blitzing, like overhead bombing, someone that could immediately respond to something caught on fire so that it didn't like devastate the entire block, right? So that became his job because it paid better and it gave him essentially a place to live because he could sleep overnight in the spot. So it kind of, it just like, it made it better for him. And it meant he was working by himself.
Everyone at the shop gave him a hard time about being what they perceived as a woman and not a man, until a teenage boy came to the shop looking for night watchman work. He and Michael became friends, and he always treated Michael like the man he was, until the day before he was leaving for the Navy. Michael asked him if he knew that he was technically, by their definition, a woman. The teenage boy said he'd been told the first day and had told the men that he'd beat them up if they gave Michael any trouble about it, and that Michael was in fact a man anyway. It's always the next generation.
This friend will be a lifelong friend, and he only is ever identified as G, and I have a feeling that's because even at the time the memoir was published, G was still alive, and that it might impact G negatively to have been such a close companion with a trans person. because they become lifelong friends. They go on motorcycle trips together. They are always, when someone's in town, like going to visit. He's friends with G's. Eventually G gets married, has children. He pays for G's son to go to private school. Like, they become really lifelong friends. Like, G was a really special guy.
That's awesome.
So Michael didn't get on with his workmates because he wasn't about stealing and cheating customers. So basically, like, there was a whole scheme at the shop to like steal fuel and different things like that. And Michael was kind of not on board with it. Like, he didn't tell on people, but he just like wasn't about that life, which is really the reason that they kind of gave him a hard time, because it was like, what's the stick up your ass, right?
Yeah, he's morally opposed to swindling people.
Yeah.
That asshole.
So Michael's boss would get on Michael about causing problems. So finally, on a trip with a workmate, Michael conceded and let the workmate fleece a customer. A few weeks later, Michael's boss came to Michael again about not getting on with his coworkers. And Michael told him about the theft and explained that if he didn't go along with it, it would create problems. Like, so if you want me to get along with the guys, that means I have to steal. Like, which one do you want to do?
Yeah.
And after that, Michael was promoted several times until he was running the garage. And the boss insisted that everyone refer to him as he.
Wow. Okay, so let me just run back through that real quick. So Michael's working. He doesn't jive with the Tom that his coworkers are pulling. And the boss would get onto him because he's the problem, because nobody likes him and he's, you know. Right. But the boss did not know about this theft ring, or the boss did.
Exactly. That didn't know.
All right. And so that's awesome.
Yeah.
The job was hard manual labor, and Michael started to grow muscular, and the hormone pills were helping him grow a beard. While all of this is going on, Bristol is being bombed relentlessly. He describes a feeling of stress and also longing, hoping that if the petrol station was hit, he would be taken out instantly. Ugh.
So, yeah, they're like the book, and I understand why, because he's very much a philosopher and he's very well respected in like those spheres of philosophy and spirituality. Like, he went on to write several tomes that are really well respected. And a lot of his philosophy is around a kind of stoicism and whatnot. So I understand why there's not a lot of dwelling. This was one of the few places in the book where he kind of alludes to a very kind of passive suicidal ideation. Sometimes the book's very matter of fact, and there's like not necessarily a lot of reflection or analysis. And I think part of that has to do with their spirituality, and they went on to spend 20 years in India in a monastery, like just practicing like full asceticism and Buddhism and everything, you know, mastering the self. A year after G left for the Navy, Michael was given a weekend off. He went to a coastal town, but couldn't afford food. He was walking about one day and woke up in the hospital. He had low blood sugar. He had fallen and hit his face. So by this time, he was dressing as a man and shaving twice a week. When the doctor asked his name, he didn't believe him because he gave the name Laura because he was in the hospital. So Michael says, "My name is Laura." And the doctor didn't believe him. The doctor has him posted in the men's ward. That night, there was another blitz. And he watched it. Michael watched it from the window of the men's ward. They were evacuated the next day, and he was in hospital for 5 weeks before returning to the garage the whole time in the men's ward.
6 months later, Michael passed out again and woke up in a hospital again. A Quaker doctor examined him and heard his story and brought with him a plastic surgeon. The plastic surgeon offered to give Michael a double mastectomy, which means to have both of his breasts removed, and that the doctor would put him in touch with an even bigger plastic surgeon who had trained him, and asked him why he didn't register as a man. Well, you make it sound so simple, Doc. Gosh, why didn't I think of that? I'm cured. Everything's easy now. Huh?
So, but again, supportive people, like people encounter this person.
Yes.
So there was something about Michael that people just saw his potential and saw his value and wanted to assure, affirm, and protect him. So as difficult as his life circumstances were, he was also still incredibly lucky.
And incredibly handsome. And you have to imagine the riz. I mean, I had already looked up a photo ages ago, but I just wanted to confirm my recollection that he is, in fact, a dime piece to death.
Yeah.
And also, I can only imagine the charisma this person must have had growing up with the matronly influence of control and honestly, what sounds kind of borderline. He sounds like he was probably a bit of a people pleaser. And when you're a people pleaser and you need to fit in, that makes charisma.
Yeah. So, I mean, also there's other revelations in this book that I think are really interesting, and we're about to get there. Okay. About why everyone was so cool about this. So if you don't know, mastectomy, or what trans people will call like top surgery, this is the first surgical procedure. Michael will go on to have 13 operations to achieve the end result. But the only thing they don't have, they don't put their face. It's all, we'll get into why it was so many surgeries. But for the most part, their build, their height, their face, like all of those things is they were born that way. Like that didn't have a lot of like intervention besides weightlifting and testosterone in the amount that he was given.
The hormone replacement therapy really can do quite a bit in that regard in terms of bringing someone to a point adjacent to gender euphoria in that regard. And I wonder how much of that. I haven't seen photos.
Certain things that will happen with testosterone that are permanent is like sort of the deepening of the voice. I think the Adam's apple can become more prominent. People mistakenly think women don't have Adam's apples. Everyone has one. Trans friend that went this FTM told me your feet get bigger.
Oh.
On testosterone. Your feet get bigger. You might lose your hair. If you're inclined to do that already, your voice will deepen.
You get really horny, apparently. You get like teenage boy level horny. Like everyone I have known on T, every trans man I know who has gone on T has been like, I feel like a 14-year-old boy and it's insane. And I love that for them. But it's basically kind of like puberty in some ways.
Yeah.
Just
different. I mean, I do have a whole joke about this because like JoJo Siwa like is going through like a rebrand right now, and and she's like, I'm new kind of music, gay pop, and everyone was like, girl. Honey. And I was making this TikTok about like there should be a rule that if you're transitioning or you're coming out for 3 years, no social media. Nope. Because you're going through a second adolescence, which means you are as insufferable as a teenager. You're the first one to do it. You know how to do it right. You're the spokesperson for it. Like, you're the one, you know all the issues front to back, and you're the person to lead the charge, and you are not. You are not. It's a time to step back. It's time to do some learning, some listening, wait. Just wait a little. Just 3 years. Just 3 years before. Tell your family and friends.
This is the same that I would advise if you're thinking about getting married when you're a teenager. Just give it some time. Just give it some time.
Because in 3 years, you're going to look back at these posts and you're going to be like, so cringe. Like, you're going to be cringing so hard because you're going to be like, oh my God.
This is not exclusive to people coming out as trans. This is any new identity, any new community that you're like, sex workers, queer. Yeah, no matter what.
Because it happens in porn too. The girl that just got in the industry and knows everything that's wrong with it.
Yeah, she's here to fix us. And tell you why you're wrong, by the way.
Right. And so like there's kind of a way to go about discussing these issues. There's a way of, say, if you're like a white trans person coming out, like you're not fully in the community to understand that they're like POC trans people that have had very different issues. It's complex. It's an intersectional space. There's a lot of different types of queer and trans people. And depending on which group you're kind of in and where those intersections are, you're going to prioritize things differently. So, like, it's best to kind of step back, do some listening, do like a lot of reading, a lot of listening, have one-on-one discussion with your elders and your peers, right?
The queer impulse to be the main character, because you suddenly get to be a character that matches your character. And you know what? I love the passion. I love the dedication, the gumption. Like, good for you.
I'm thinking if there was like a creator that's newly trans, and they kind of had this thing of doing like lives while they were eating at restaurants. And like anytime that they would get misgendered, they would like call the manager over like on live and be like, I was just this. And it's like a lot of people, queer, trans, and alike, were like, hey.
Like, don't fuck with someone's job. Don't fuck with someone's money.
Like
don't care in this.
Well, people are like, listen, like, this is clearly like a server that got confused. Like, it seems very obvious that it was like not a malicious thing. And we're all about activism, but like, we're also not about like trying to get working class people fired. Like, when they're not deliberately trying to hurt your feelings, it's like, maybe you're just not at the place where you're as passable yet as you want to be. But like, it doesn't mean someone was deliberately trying to like hurt you. And so a lot of trans and queer content creators were like, hey sis, like, just come here for a minute, you know?
There's a cost benefit analysis.
Just going like, hey, like, you know, this is maybe not the best look because this kind of makes us kind of seem sort of mean spirited or petty, or, you know, like, it's not necessarily building the bridges we want to be building.
Right.
But that's happened. I mean, that happens with queer creators too. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it happens all the time. So if you're a listener that's like, why do people hate on Dillon Mulvaney? Or why do people do this? 9 times out of 10, it's because someone gets thrust into the spotlight, and that is luck of the draw, right? It's not like they chose to suddenly be really popular, right? They like suddenly have this huge platform, and it almost never seems to occur to someone that has just gotten a huge platform to ask, to go to another queer person that's like an elder and go, hey, these people are going to interview me. Can you give me some talking points? Mm-hmm. They try to wing it. So they get the opportunity, and then it's like, oh, I'm going to be on the Today Show. Okay, yeah. And they decide to just wing it. And so 9 times out of 10, if you're seeing like a queer trans creator that people are just like, it's usually because it's someone that got their 15 minutes and then like didn't ask anyone for like guidance, mm-hmm. and then went on a huge platform somewhere, mm-hmm. and like winged it and like said the wrong thing. So Michael got their double mastectomy and had become acquainted with a doctor in Bath who was willing to sign a medical certificate stating that Michael was male. And then he had to get one from a family member. So remember that Quaker, the friend of the Quaker doctor is like, why don't you like re-register, right?
Right.
So in order to register, you had to have, I think, like a certificate of health, et cetera, from a doctor, and then another one from family confirming your identity, and then you register, right? Okay. So Michael finds a doctor in Bath that will do the medical certificate, and they don't go into it. And I think this was to protect people, but clearly someone helped Michael find that doctor because this was an issue. Knowing that Michael could not go to immediate family, he wrote to a cousin who was progressive and kind of hoped for the best. So I can only imagine what a letter like that is like. Hey, Suze, some changes around the house. You seem really cool. Anyway, vomit out an existential identity crisis. Anyway, if you could just help out, because I need to tell this big lie to the government. I have a beard now. And no titties anymore. Yeah. Like, I mean, just trying to imagine what it's like to sit down and write a letter like that, where kind of everything is hinging on this person having empathy and compassion for what you're going through and being willing to help you. And it's not even someone you're close to.
Yeah.
You know, like that. It's just like, that must have been harrowing. But Michael is so stoic. It's sometimes hard in the memoir because there's not a lot of emotional reflection. And I think that's kind of for a reason.
Yeah.
But so he writes to this cousin, and the cousin agreed and wrote the letter.
That's amazing.
So Michael submits their application and was accepted. And Lauren became Lawrence Michael Dillon.
Oh, what an achievement. That is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
I love that for him. Give me a sec. When Michael went to the labor exchange for new ID cards, they didn't bat an eyelash. They said they had gotten a lot of these.
Which then that is...
Okay, so that immediately, like, a lot of these? Or
a lot of, yes. Like, I'm not a woman, I'm a man. I'm not a man, I'm a woman.
So roughly what year was this?
This is, so Michael got their surgery in 46. And at that point, they had been living as a man already for 9 years. So it's like late 30s, early 40s is when... So the first procedure is the mastectomy, the top surgery. And it's like after the top surgery is when he put in for the name change. So I'm guessing, probably early 40s, late 30s. So this
is really not a new or particularly modern thing.
Apparently, the people down at the ID office have known that trans is a thing for a very long time. Back to them librarians. Turns out the people that keep the actual documents have known for a long ass time that this is a thing.
And it's been so unremarkable that why would anybody talk about it?
Because Laura Dillon walks in with a beard and no titties and tall and muscular and says, they got it wrong. My name is actually Lawrence. And they're like, yeah.
Sounds about right. Good for them.
Yeah. So, once again, the knowledge keepers are never surprised because they know everyone's secrets. Like the people working at the DMV have known that trans is a thing since like the 50s or 60s.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's like, of course. Because they're the ones that are actually doing the process in the machine, right?
Right. They're interacting with the people on the core aspect of their identity. That makes total sense.
Yeah.
Well, then he got his call-up papers. What does that mean? What are call-up papers?
That's when you're drafted.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, wow.
Welcome to manhood.
Indeed.
Welcome to manhood.
The doctors doing his medical exam told him they'd turned down a lot of people like him, and he was sent back to the garage. A doctor... So he's sent back.
So to clarify, like identity people are like, yeah, that's fine. Gets drafted, goes for the medical exam. They see that he has a vagine and are like, yeah, we turn away a lot of people like you. Again.
Not shocking. Not new.
Yeah.
Michael is sent back to the garage, and a doctor suggested to him that he go into medicine. After thinking about it, he decided to do it. He didn't have a science background, so he went to technical school during the day and worked nights at the garage, trying to meet the requirements for medical school.
No big.
You know, just working at the garage during the day, med school by night. Every aspect of this person's life could be its own discrete rom-com or TV show or dramedy. It's all across the board. Quote, "It was the first time that I was able to start among people who knew nothing whatever about me and accepted me as an ordinary young man. The relief was indescribable," he said.
So now we're getting to my favorite part. Now, if you listened last week, this guy's a rock star.
We love him.
Yeah, but let us introduce him again. Soon after, Michael met with Harold Gillies.
Our boy.
The
good doctor.
The renowned plastic surgeon. Gillies asked him a series of questions. He answered them all. Gillies examined him up and down. And Michael is like, "Please, Jesus." And after the exam, Harold Gillies turns to him and says, "I think your case merits surgical interference. I will put you down as an acute hypospadiac," unquote.
I am Googling that as we speak. You bet your britches, you bet your bottom dollar I'm Googling that. Okay. Hypospadias is, according to the Google, a condition in which the opening of the penis is on the underside rather than the tip, is one definition. It's a relatively rare congenital condition where the opening of the penis is on the underside of the organ. This condition is more common in infants, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so basically Dr. Gillies is like, yeah, it seems like your penis that you have just needs some work on the penis you already definitely have. Is that what we're getting here?
Yeah.
Or am I
Yeah.
Okay. At the time, Gillies told him it would have to wait because of the war and the amount of patients that he had to take on. Lawrence Michael Dillon was content to wait. So he went back to tech school and working at the garage. His next problem was how to transfer his Oxford credits to a medical school, since the transcripts were in his female name. He reached out to Jimmy McKee, who knew of his
that was that lifelong friend, like that one of those scholars, right? Yeah.
We love you, Jimmy, who knew of his transition and was able to get his degree to be changed to his initials instead of his full name, and wrote him a glowing letter of reference. He ended up at Trinity College in Dublin. His brother, Bobby, was near Dublin, and when they met for lunch, Bobby told him not to ever couple their names in public or to visit him at his home. Well, you, Bobby, why don't you, like you and the horse you rode in on, Bobby?
Yeah, so Bobby was the first in line for the baronetcy, like the baronet. Mm-hmm. Was living in the ancestral home, but it was like very Grey Gardens. So it's like through an uncle or this or that. It's like the baronetcy had been passed down. The place was if you're like, oh my God, we're getting married in a castle. The reason that you can rent out castles and stuff like that is they're very expensive to maintain, and they're not weatherproof. They're a drain. They're very uncomfortable to live in.
It's a money pit.
Yeah, because if you put in modern amenities, the amount of money you're going to spend just heating and cooling a place that doesn't have insulation or any of that. And then if you change anything, there's all kinds of rules around that. So like the brother has the baronetcy and like that cares about appearances, but you have to understand it's like someone living in a gilded. Mm-hmm. It's like there's no money to like maintain this, but the brother that he had been super close to in childhood is just like, don't visit me. Don't say you're related to me. You've made this decision. You are a different person now. You're no longer part of this family.
Damn.
You recreated yourself. Good. You recreated yourself in the singular, right? Okay. So finally, in 1946, so I believe the war is over at this point. So Harold Gillies is his date book, his dance card is in his fold. If you want to understand why Harold Gillies is a rock star, go listen to the Harold Gillies episode, because amazing human being.
Fantastic. Phenomenal.
So in 1946, Dillon underwent a phalloplasty. In Dillon's own account, he just mentions having the procedure and the process of harvesting flaps. So I've broken down what a phalloplasty actually is, understanding that Dillon was the first person to have the operation for psychological reasons, but far from the first person who needed one. So why Dr. Gillies is important, if you did not listen to the previous one, is that prior to World War I, generally massive soft tissue damage meant death. People could lose a limb and survive. You could lose the tip of your nose and survive. But if your face got blasted open, bleed out, suffocate on your own blood before help can come get you. And then during World War I, they had flamethrowers, chemical warfare, machine guns. So they had weapons that could just do a lot more damage. And the worst offender was actually shrapnel, because you'd have these white hot pieces of jagged metal flying everywhere, and they would just cut through everything, right? And so Harold Gillies created a specific hospital for dealing with people that were disfigured, that he called in artists to do prosthetics. He called in dentists to figure out how to reconfigure things. He brought in ear, nose, and throat doctors, plastic surgeons, all of it. And he was doing everything on the fly and innovated pretty much every cosmetic procedure that we get today, because he was trying to reconstruct a normal face. So when you go in and get a nose job, you get your eyelids done, whatever, the reason they know how to do that is because this guy, Harold Gillies, and his team of doctors were dealing with people that were severely disfigured by incredibly traumatic injuries. And their goal was to get the face as close as possible back to a kind of aesthetic ideal. So bone grafts, skin grafts, he pioneered the way all those things were done. He pioneered multiple special surgical instruments and tools to do the job. He fundamentally changed all of it. So there's two kinds of injuries that were very consistent. So in World War I, they were using trench warfare. So trench warfare is you dig a trench in the ground and you peek your head up to fire, which means anything coming at you is coming at your face.
Yes.
Facial injuries, a lot of them. The second, landmines. You step on some, what's going to be blown apart? Your junk, your genitals. So he had to reconstruct a lot of penises for men that had their blown off, that had their nut sacks taken off, right? He had that. It's very important for our psychological, functional well-being, right?
Yeah.
And he recognized that, and it's the same reason that we do reconstructive surgery on women. There are women in their 60s, their 70s that have breast cancer and they get a breast removed. And even though they're no longer sexual, they've gone through menopause. They're not trying to, right? If you watch these documentaries around breast cancer and mastectomies, I was really moved by women that are in their 60s and 70s that get reconstructive surgery, and they talk about feeling like a woman again, feeling whole. And that's, again, that difference between gender and sex and sexual attraction versus gender, is that these are women that are not out seeking sexual partners. They're not trying to have titties to look good for the male gaze. They're trying to have titties to feel integrated in their bodies.
They want to feel comfortable in their own skin the way they've always lived in their own skin. That it's implying that I would get plastic surgery because I'm really worried what my favorite manager at Trader Joe's is going to think.
Right. It's it's a much more internal process. Anyway, this is why Harold Gillies was the man for the job. However, he had not been working from nothing before. The first one. He also did one of the first vagines, designer pussies, as they say. He also did one of the first operations to turn a penis into a vagina. So he was very much on literally the bleeding edge of surgical technology. So the history of phalloplasty, very quickly. Some of the earliest forms of genital reconstruction can be traced back to ancient civilizations, though these were rudimentary and primarily for treating injuries. Significant advancements in reconstructive surgery, including phalloplasty, occurred during and after the World Wars due to the need to treat soldiers with severe genital injuries. We just went into why. So modern phalloplasty techniques began to develop. Sir Harold Gillies, that's right, Sir Harold Gillies,
Sir,
a pioneering plastic surgeon, performed one of the first recorded phalloplasty procedures in 1946, on Michael Dillon.
Techniques evolved to improve the functional and aesthetic outcomes. Microsurgery advancements allowed for the transplantation of nerves and blood vessels, enhancing sensation and erectile function. Further refinements in surgical methods and post-op care have continued with a focus on improving outcomes for trans men, as well as cis men with congenital conditions or with traumatic injuries. So basically, if you're somebody who has a penis or should have a penis, it's always ongoing for you.
The procedure, because that's what we're here for.
Yes.
So phalloplasty involves constructing a penis using tissue from other parts of the patient's body. The procedure can be complex and typically involves multiple stages. Psychological evaluation, hormonal therapy, and medical clearance are typically required. Common donor sites include the forearm, the radial forearm flap, thigh, anterolateral thigh flap, and back, latissimus dorsi flap.
Radial forearm flap. A segment of skin, fat, and blood vessels from the forearm is used. This is one of the most common methods due to the good aesthetic and functional outcomes. Other flaps, tissue from the thigh or back, can be used depending on patient preference, surgeon experience, and specific medical conditions. Michael Dillon's flaps were harvested from his inner thighs.
So, the harvested flap is rolled into a tube to form the shaft of the penis. Microsurgical techniques are used to connect blood vessels and nerves to the neophallus. If creating a functional urethra, part of the harvested tissue is used to extend the existing urethra through the neophallus. This allows for urination through the reconstructed penis. To enable erectile function, a penile implant may be inserted in a later stage. Types of implants include inflatable devices and semi-rigid rods. The glans, or the head of the penis, can be sculpted to enhance the aesthetic appearance. Additional procedures may be needed to refine the appearance, enhance functionality, or address complications.
I have a friend who had phalloplasty where they had an inflatable device that they utilize.
A lot of male porn stars have those too.
No, that's really cool.
Yeah.
It's the innovation.
Yes.
Urinary function and sexual sensation can vary. Nerve connections may allow for some sensation, though it may not be equivalent to a natural penis. Advances in technique have greatly improved the visual results. Risks include infection, flap necrosis, urethral complications, and implant issues.
So, Michael Dillon did not have these issues. After the surgery, Dillon's transition was complete. He wrote a book during all of this dealing with the concept of intersex, or what we would call transsexual individuals, from a psychological point of view and a philosophical one, and was able to publish it. He wrote a book kind of documenting like everything that he had done and what he went through. He in the book does not go into any of this. What he does describe is the harvesting process vaguely. He describes, so he went through 13 surgeries over 4 years. A lot of that entailed cutting flaps from the thighs and harvesting them. So he would be walking around with these bandages and all of this stuff, going through these procedures, and no one had any idea. And he did this all through like medical school. He would get on break from medical school and go see Dr. Gillies and get another procedure and then like go through the whole thing. So he goes through all of this And after 4 years, he graduates from medical school and gets work on naval vessels. He's not in the Navy, but gets work on naval vessels as a surgeon. He travels the world for like 6 years. He is Michael Dillon. He starts going by Michael instead of Lawrence. He's Michael Dillon. He's bearded. He's strapped. He's packing heat. Mm-hmm. He becomes a surgeon during this process. So he gets out of medical school. He's working on these ships. He becomes a surgeon. He is doing the thing. He's in India. He's in China. He's going here. He's going there. No one knows anything. He's having the time of his life. He's meeting amazing people. He is exploring his philosophy and spirituality. He's very attracted to Stoicism, Buddhism. It's like he's just doing the thing. He's just doing the thing. And no one suspects a thing. And then
he was ultimately outed because of his nobility. There are peerage records that are made of everyone's descendancy, and changing one's name in those had been impossible. And eventually somebody noticed that discrepancy. After living as Michael Dillon for 15 years, he was on board a ship when he got a cable from England. It was from the Daily Express, and it said, "Do you intend to claim the title since your changeover?" These news rags have never been good. They've never been okay. They're terrible.
Yeah. So from Out of the Ordinary, quote, "The reference to my changeover could only mean one thing. My secret had leaked out after 15 years. Here was the end of my emancipation. But had Bobby died, which might account for the leakage? My hand trembled as I screwed the cable up and threw it in the wastepaper basket. Then along came the agent to tell me 2 reporters were wanting to see me and were in his office on the wharf. He gave no sign whether he knew why they were there. There was nothing to be done except accept the inevitable. I went back to my cabin, lit my pipe to steady my nerves, and put on my cap without which one should not go ashore, and went down the gangway, my old poker face put aside, once more resumed. The 2 reporters, one armed with a camera, were not unsympathetic, but they made it clear they had a job to do and were not to be diverted from it. And they wanted a photograph. If I did not consent, they would take it anyway, so they might as well be allowed to get a good one. There was nothing for it but to sit there, puffing at my pipe, and let them take it. Finally, after answering questions in the shortest possible way and volunteering nothing, I was allowed to leave."
He goes on, "I made a beeline for the captain's cabin, praying he might be in his paternal mood. He was pacing the deck in his shirt sleeves, but went into his cabin and we sat down. I then told him about the reporters, that they were here solely on my private business because it had somehow been discovered by the press that I was heir to a title and had changed my sex, after the secret had been well kept for 15 editorializing years."
He became kindly and sympathetic at once and promised to do all he could to help, which would consist chiefly in keeping reporters off the ship there and when we arrived in New York in a day or 2, for we were sailing the next day. He thereupon cabled the agents in New York asking for a police guard for the gangway. Now, I went into breakfast knowing I had about 8 hours respite before the evening papers would be out and my brother officers would know.
Oh my God, I cannot imagine the anxiety of that period. Well, while his crew was supportive, ultimately he had to leave the service. His presence was at best a distraction and at worst a safety issue. He went on to live in India and became a monk, author, and spiritual leader highly respected in philosophical spheres.
And he became a monk, he became an ascetic. He went to India, he published several books, but, just lived a life of solitude and reflection and, but that...
Hopefully comfort in that he was able to live to some degree as what, as his most authentic self.
Yeah. So that is Michael Dillon.
That's Michael Dillon. Thank you so much.
Not the first trans man, but as far as we know, the first trans man to undergo a phalloplasty and like do the whole
bottom surgery
thing. Yeah.
Yeah. This was so good. Thank you for this journey. These would be the second and third men we have invited to whatever degree into our podcast, other than our producer, Josh, who is our favorite. And I really loved this. I thought it was really good. And so if anybody ever bitches that we never talk about men, yes, the fuck we do.
Yeah, they just have to be like an Oxford grad, 6'2" doctor.
Like so handsome and charismatic.
So, housekeeping. We do have a Patreon. Treat it like a tip jar. We have one tier. It's $5 a month. We drop occasional bonus content, but think of it as a tip jar. We do a lot of research. We do a lot of work to bring these episodes to you. If you are inclined and able, please go to patreon.com/illrepute and give us a little tip. Yeah. illreputepodcast.com for more about us and all the other places you can watch or listen to the podcast. Sources today were The Facemaker and Out of the Ordinary by Michael Dillon. And yeah, go back and listen to the previous episode about Harold Gillies to get all the tea on why he was so phenomenal. And we will see you next week because I think we're doing Ella. And for the first time, Josh producer, Mr. Josh Anderson, is taking his hand and writing a script. And we're going to be talking about Josh Anderson's favorite celebrity, Anna Nicole Smith.
She's a queen. She's a queen. She's a queen and
yeah, I'm super excited. So you can't we have 2 episodes about men, and we're letting a man write an episode.
So don't ever come at us.
We are empowering men with our
This is our armor against critics.
Yeah.
Yes, we did. Yes, we did.
Yeah.
Yes, we did. I love you so much.
Yes. Love you too.